Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, deathly serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And we'll go to China today and talk about China embracing some of the worst aspects of capitalism. And this is part of my overall premise that China, which is pictured as this nemesis of the United States and wanting to undermine the United States' dominance financially and economically around the globe, which is true, but they're not really at odds. They really want to participate, and there's no better examples than some of these recent moves by China to indulge in some of what I think are some of the worst habits of the U.S. Financial system and banking system. So first of all, we go to a story from last March 2016 when Bloomberg reported that China will allow domestic banks to issue as much as $7.6 billion of asset-backed securities. And let's remember, asset-backed securities, particularly mortgage-backed securities, are something that got the American banking system in some serious trouble. And they sold 70 billion of these asset-backed securities in 2015. And two things are interesting about this. First of all, the fact that China banned the use of any asset-backed securities up until 2013. They were so shocked and scared of what happened in the American banking system, they outright banned them. But since 2013, they've turned around and are now allowing hundreds of billions of dollars of asset-backed securities to be sold in China. But one of the other things that sets these apart are they're stated right at the beginning that these are backed by proceeds from selling non-performing loans. So they're telling you right up front that they're selling asset-backed securities that are based on non-performing loans, and this is 1.27 trillion yuan renminbi in non-performing loans going into these. So that's what could go wrong there, right? And then we also have the fact that China is now having local pension funds will launch a first wave of investment in the domestic stock market within a few months, and 40% will go into equities and stock funds. So 30 to 60 billion dollars to start. So anyway, just like the rest of the world, we're now going to have China's pension funds buying stocks and investing in the stock market. And this is even after the shocks that the Chinese stock market took recently. So what could go wrong there as well? They go on to say that, quote, it could increase returns, but it was primarily done to support the stock market, unquote. So there's another similarity to China to here. It could increase returns, which is what the stated goal is, but it's primarily done to jack the stock market, and so they're doing the same thing there as they're doing here. And state pension funds were previously restricted from riskier assets. So once again, China previously had a little sanity and closed the doors to some of this, but now are opening the doors for all sorts of riskier things. And speaking of riskier things, China is now going to market credit default swaps. So they're also getting involved in exotic financial instruments, and they trying to lure investors back into the Chinese market when there's fears of all that could go wrong there. And credit default swaps are supposed to provide some insurance. But once again, one of the exotic instruments that wreaked havoc in the American banking system, the American economy 6-7 years ago. And now China is unleashing these in order to try and bolster their economy along with their Western brothers. And this is the background of this, about this, of course, is just all the dire warnings about China. Of course, we haven't seen mortgage-backed securities, which would be an incredible nightmare in China, but Fitch ratings warn that the bad debts in the Chinese banking systems are 10 times higher than the official numbers. So that's something to worry about, investing in any of these exotic financial instruments and using any of these financial machinery. For example, investing in the stock market, the pension funds, when all these numbers are cooked, they're cooked probably worse than the numbers in the West, if that can be believed. But rescue costs could add up to 1/3 of GDP, $2.1 trillion by 2018 at the rate China's going. So these are some dire warnings. 15 to 20% of all bank loans are non-performing. China says there's only 1.8%, but once again, you can't trust those numbers. So think about the situation with the banking crisis in Europe and the banking problems we have in the United States, and then you look at someplace like China, and they have 20% non-performing loans. So how far do you think credit default swaps and asset-backed securities and pension funds investing in the market are going to go? And that's not even getting into shadow banking system and everything else. So anyway, pretty interesting how China is adapting some of the worst features, and it comes at a time when they're trying to further integrate themselves into the international community financially and economically, and this includes the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And related Chinese news, just because I'm doing this video, we have Canada now applying, one of the U.S.'s most staunch allies and trading partners. Now they are applying to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So once again, along with all these other U.S. allies like Germany, New Zealand, we got Canada now joining this bank that supposedly is going to be a threat to the hegemony of the United States economically, and the IMF and the World Bank. And it turns out that's not true. And more evidence of that is the fact that Mongolia is now asking the IMF for a rescue loan. They're not going to China. They're not going to the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. They're going to the same old characters, the IMF and the like. And then last but not least, as far as I'm doing Chinese news, of course, it was supposed to be a huge bang, but it becomes a whimper that the Chinese renminbi is now joining the IMF basket of currencies. So now it is part of the reserve currency system of the world, but it doesn't amount to much as predicted, at least at this point. But at least China's getting to participate like they wanted to do, and the impact has just been integration into the system and nothing more. So more of this painted adversarial relationship with China gets chipped away by some of the things that I brought up in this video, at least in my viewpoint. So China, going for it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.